And here we are for another call-in show. Very excited about this. I love the call-in show. Last week we had actually quite a few people call in. It was a lot of fun. This week I'm hoping that we also have a few people call in, but if not, that's fine too. I mean, there's no shortage of shit to talk about by any means, and we just had an awesome episode of Social. Admittedly, that was a lot of fun. We did start this off about, I don't know, 30 seconds early, so what the hell? I'm just going to pass it on over to Andrew while I look onto our community Discord to see if there are any questions there. If anybody would like to join us on the episode, you can do so right off the hop. Go to dualisticulunity.com/live, and you will go into the queue where we can let you into this fun little conversation that we're about to happen, and I have no idea where it's going.
Yes, feel free to call in. Oh, we did get that in at the end of that. This is so interesting seeing us delayed on the screen.
Isn't it, though?
I'm seeing myself, what is this, like 10-second delay? So on oh, there's the line. Now it's like reverted back to a different period of time.
It was a glitch in the matrix.
It's still, man. I know it's fun. It's enjoyable. I'm not going to talk about that the whole. But
The floor is yours, sir.
On the social, it was fun. We had a pastor in there for a bit, chatting about God and Jesus and all of that. And for a while, I always wanted to keep that like, oh, it's a silly thing to focus on. You know, it's a silly thing to believe in, bedtime story, all that. Like just like Santa Claus. But I've been looking more at like the reasons that we believe in stuff like that, like the reasons, the where that comes from, like why someone wants to believe in God so bad, or authority, or a sense of someone, you know. And it's that sense of like someone telling you what to do, you know, telling you the right next step. Because like if you don't look to anyone, that there is just kind of this open-ended sort of experience that like there isn't a given direction, so it requires more sensitivity and more attention and more, you know, awareness to like the situation that you're on. And if you don't want to do that, you'll just pass that off by looking to someone else. Because here it's like you're here, like, and you not in just like, well, yeah, and the reality of you, but that's also all the things that you maybe don't want to look at about yourself, like all the ways that you're acting a little bit more selfishly. Like that's such a big reason why we'll look to someone else, because we don't want to give up those things that we're doing, you know, the selfish actions. We don't want to be selfless, you know. We don't want to like really look at all of those things and all of those focuses and priorities. Like we want to have both, but it's like letting go of that one, you let go of the other. And it's such a pull to want to maintain that. But when you start looking at yourself and like all of your focuses and tendencies and like noticing those and shifting and changing and shifting your priorities and maintaining that like look at yourself and that self-honesty, then you know there isn't so much of a need to look to someone else, because there is a little bit more sensitivity. You are able to be a little bit more aware of the environment that you're in, of, you know, your surroundings and whatnot, instead of just like being very insensitive and unaware. And that's when, you know, people don't recognize the impacts of their actions. But as long as you're, you know, it's anytime we look down the road for like a next thing, looking forward to something, it's like believing in God and heaven and this sort of like even afterlife is very much just like eyes way down the road, way down on that big prize. And so as long as you're checking boxes along the way, you can kind of do whatever you want. And that's certainly not the case, but yeah, so there's reasons that we look for those things, you know, and a lot of it has to do with us wanting to just maintain our perspective, opinion, and
Well, yeah.
distract.
Right, because it's funny because sometimes I'll hear people idolizing, you know, being a kid. And I don't have that same fantasy about childhood, although I feel like I enjoyed the experience of quote unquote being a kid, but I don't think back and be like, oh, I wish I could go back. And it's because being a kid is incredibly hard because you're not in control, you're not autonomous, you don't get to decide what to do with your day to day. You have moments where you get to be in imagination land, where you get to be in your room, where you get to be doing anything that you want to do. But for the most part, you are having someone tell you where to go, what to wear, what to eat, what are you going to do, what are you going to read. You know, they're picking all of the things that you're going to be exposed to or limiting the things that you're going to be exposed to. They're essentially creating the experience of your childhood. And so that's not curated by you though. And the moments that I think I say like that I look back where I was like, oh my God, that was epic and glorious. And it's like moments where I'm playing on a playground with a bunch of kids and we're getting the small moment to be autonomous, to be responsible for our experience, to create our experience, and to make decisions about what we're going to prioritize when we have those little blurps on that radar where we got to be like, it's not worth it to enforce that rule. You know, we're making the tree home base, but if somebody doesn't, you know, someone cheats, like, you know, like you had to really curate that experience. And those are the moments that I think get relished and inflated. And because a lot of your childhood was getting told what to do and where to go. And that sucked. You know, and so we think that like, oh, you know, not being responsible when we were kids and we weren't quote unquote responsible, it was fantastic. And it's like it wasn't. And the times where it actually felt like it was fantastic, in my opinion, are the times where we were responsible for the experience we were creating and we weren't in conflict with what we were creating.
Somebody was asking in the comment section, is it still hot? As yesterday we actually ended the episode a little bit early because it was so goddamn hot. It is in fact still hot. The nice thing is that this morning I went out and ventured and found myself a small portable air conditioner specifically for the corner of this room. So it is no longer as hot. It's much more bearable, and so we are going to ride out the entire episode today. Appreciate you being with us.
Because yeah, that difference, you know, between being a kid and being an adult, basically, like we very much do. We can like cherry pick moments because it was like a lot of awareness here and like very little of surroundings, pretty much. Like that was the difference. And you know, it's like that process of becoming more and more and more of surroundings. We were talking the other day about like realizing, oh, it's not just, you know, the bedroom or the house or the town, and then it like expands to country and then world, and it keeps growing. So that awareness grow. It's like that awareness grows, and the pull to try and control that, like as it expands, because then it starts to include, you know, other perspectives. You realize people, you know, have opinions, have thoughts about like right and wrong ways to live. You start taking those in too. You start becoming more and more aware of those. And it's like there can be this sense of almost feeling like you can try to control all of that as you become more and more aware. There's a pull to like put attention towards, you know, all those things that could be possible because you're so much more aware of more stuff, more potentials. And you know, as you grow up, it's like you can feel like that and almost lose track of like the attention being involved in where you're at, because as much as all of that exists in potential, like the only real thing, the only real experience you're ever going to have is now, is this. And so it's like being able to have that awareness of it and coming back to the, you know, childish sort of focus on the moment that you're in while maintaining both. Because as kids, there was so much hyper, you know, attention on like, you know, the fucking thing you were doing, the arts and crafts thing you were making or something. Like that was your entire universe, was that drawing as you were drawing something. You know, there wasn't even potentially any other considerations of how it was going at all. And you don't, yeah. So I am, yeah, no, that was where I was at. That was why I started reading that. No, that was the end. We have a guest. We have someone who has called in. First caller of the day. We got Jay Nizzle in the hizzle.
Tourism?
Nizzle. And Trizzle. Yeah.
All right.
It is a rizzle.
Hey, Jay. What's up?
I totally forgot that was on there. That's funny. I didn't type that in today. How are you? How y'all doing?
Doing good, man. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Good to see you too. Oh, hey.
What did you?
Okay, here we go. I was trying to avoid. I paused that. Technical difficulties.
Hey, no worries. No worries.
Hope
Where
y'all
would you
doing.
like to take us today?
Well, I'm enjoying what Andrew was just talking about. Actually, just kind of the focus on the here and now, essentially, because that's kind of where I'm finding myself in life. Like lately, I was in a period of sort of like general panic there for a while. Like I hate to sound like dramatic with it, but that's kind of like the state that I was in, with like feeling anxiety and feeling like these stories, and like life wasn't like working out the way I wanted it to, and there was this problem and that problem and all these issues and all these things, and they sort of like I let them stack up on top of each other, and it became this big devastating story. And I was really feeling that, I just not feeling great for quite a while. And but that is a blessing, because I felt all that stuff, I was able to realize the kind of absurdity of it. And lately I've just been like, hey, I'm just here right now. That's really all it is. And whether that's sitting in a chair or talking to y'all, that's the only thing that's actually happening. So I've been like just kind of deepening a little bit more into just right here and now. And it's been like quite peaceful, which is nice, but that's not a requirement, you know what I mean? But it's nice. So things have been good.
That is
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, it's I often call it kind of feeling the silence underneath all the noise, right? Like underneath all of it, there's that inner part of you that's somehow just watching it. It's not really part of it. It's like there's a stillness underneath everything when you just allow yourself to sink into where you are, but it's never found in thought. It's always found in that place where you just settle and you're just, here I am. And suddenly it's like everything just slows the fuck down. It's not that everything's slowed down though, it's just that you stopped running around, long enough to actually sit and just be yourself. And I think there's so much to be learned just in that simple thing of just sitting and being yourself.
Which is nice. I know DU doesn't, like you've talked about meditation. That's kind of like what we can do just walking around. Like meditation isn't necessary. However, I do enjoy it. And I have been learning how to sit in Zazen, which is just a specific way of sitting. That's it. There's nothing more to it. So, but it's been quite interesting just sitting there, because when I'm sitting, I notice feelings, uncomfortableness, thoughts, all these different things sort of happening, but I don't need to necessarily pay attention to all that stuff. So it's been fun just to kind of keep that muscle going, a little bit, keep practicing a little bit, which is nice.
Oh, I feel you, man. Like I definitely resonate with that sense of trying to control a bunch of stuff too. That's what it can feel like to me, to like have stories piling up, or sort of things that you start thinking about something, then just has a way of sort of expanding and expanding and expanding, and then you can feel like a physical sort of tense response to it, to focusing on that, the stories and whatnot. And just like a lot of it for me recently, like kind of feeling back and forth, but feeling more of a settling, is just like deciding myself, like, am I good now? It's like, yeah, I'm good now. And like in whatever's coming up, whatever response is like, well, not until, or what about this or that, or this feeling or that. And it's like, no, I can feel all that stuff. And I can, even the swarm of thoughts can be like, kind of racing, and I can be aware that like, oh, that's something that's happening and it's like going on, but I'm still here regardless. And like, I'm still capable if I'm not holding myself to a bar that like in order to be capable to handle a situation or be in a certain spot, like I have to do this or do that. It's like, no, that's not a requirement. Like I can choose to like pay attention and be like, no, I'm enough in whatever shows up. Like I don't have to hold a bar for myself. And a lot of times when I go through periods where it feels like, you know, swells or shifts or whatever, it's getting a good look at just like a perspective and like consequence of focusing on that. Like there's a whole experience that then, you know, I can look at as to, you know, way to resonate and whatnot too, even. But it's yeah, at some point it's just like, oh, it really is just on me and my response, and letting go of my own assumptions and focusing on, you know, things that I'm not sure of. Like I don't know everything. I don't know everything. I don't even know much outside of that. I'm sitting here in a chair, just like you, chatting with Jay Hizzle, Ryan Amanda on a call-in show.
Right, but y'all, it's funny that we think like we assume that if we knew everything, life would be perfect, or what life would be without suffering. And it's like that's a bold claim. That's a bold ass claim, you know. And you had mentioned capability, and my mind thinks, you know, the people that I would heard called masters and experts and savants are the people that tend to typically show the greatest attention to detail in a particular direction. So greater attention, greater ability, greater capability. And that feels a lot more possible than someone just being born with just a special ability or a special potential, you know, or, you know, that one of us could know everything and that would be separate from everyone else. And so I think it's so funny that with greater attention just comes greater ability by default. And the people that we call experts are the people that have the greatest attention to detail in a very specific context. But we classify them as special and different, and you know, and it being like not as possible for everyone.
Kind of goes hand in hand. Oh, sorry about that. I'll have to call you back, Dad.
I'll tell you.
What did you say now?
Floor is yours.
Floor is yours,
Yeah,
sir.
speaking of that, like it goes hand in hand with the religious conversation that kind of was going on in the chat during the live stream episode that you guys had. You know, like looking to something else for guidance, or looking to somebody else as some expert, whether that's you know, your God, your religion, your pastor, your boss, your politician, whatever the case might be. Like there's people that are like practicing certain things, but they don't necessarily have it all figured out. Like they've had a little bit more experience, but it doesn't mean that they have the answers, you know. And one thing I'm coming to terms with that as well is like everything that I've been kind of attracted to the goings on of the world a little bit, you know, when things are like down and out in my head a little bit, like those things start to sort of become attractive, like the, you know, political this, that, or the Supreme Court said this or that, or all that stuff, you know what I mean? And it's like, oh, it kind of hurts my heart, you know, because some of that stuff is fucked up, to be honest, you know. And it's like, you know, but at the same time, like I can't dive into that really, like not now. I'm sitting here in the chair talking to you guys, you know what I mean? And like I could talk about it, but like it's nothing that I need to concern myself really. Like my want for things to be different isn't going to change like anything, you know. The only thing I can do is just like be me, and just fucking be me. Really, that's all it is.
Yeah, I hear
Pardon-
that. I used
pardon
to
the
do
swear.
the same, you know. Yeah, because we never fucking swear on this. I used to do the same, but I'd go and I'd check in kind of like what the world was doing and you know, catch the news or go down a rabbit hole or two every once in a while. And I found after a while that I was really just looking for some indication of how the world was doing. I was looking for some sense of comfort or even some sense of dread, I guess. I just wanted to know how the world was doing. And what I've realized over the years is that there's a trade there in exactly the way that you're talking about, and that you are the world. You know, in looking for some indication of how it's doing, you're putting less attention into how it's doing.
Yeah.
Which is something that's only happening through you.
We
True.
just have that fact that like it's happening through us.
Yeah.
Like, no, it's out there. Like the world's shit. No, it's like, oh man, yeah. Yeah, it's like not at all out there whatsoever. It's like we keep looking for change, trying to find the right way to change, trying to control it, trying to create a structure, look to this, look to that. It's like, oh, big discounting of your experience. And even something, like you said, something that works for someone, like that works for them. That's all we got. It's like, this worked for me. There's no guarantee it'll work for anyone else.
Or for long.
Oh,
It's working for now.
correct.
That's like as best as I can give people, if we're gonna be honest.
Jay, man, I'm so glad you called in today. Thank you, man, for just touching
Thanks.
base, of course.
Good talking to you.
Jay is actually a you know, a valued and I would say consistent member of the community. We've met him at a number of events, and we in fact work with him to some capacity. Jay offers one-on-one sessions. If you'd ever like to have a private chat with Jay, just go to dualisticunity.com/Jay, and it'll take you to his offerings. And I highly recommend having a chat. Again, it's not therapy, but really therapy is just the establishment of a therapeutic relationship. It's not really about the therapist, it's more about what you do with it and what the other person's willing to just sit through with you and allow you to vent while you get out and kind of be your accountability buddy to some degree. Like, hey, I know that one. That's when I'm full of shit too. So reach out to Jay if you can. Jay, hopefully we'll see you on Patreon later on after the show.
Yeah. Thank you. I'd love to hear from anybody. Have a good night, y'all. Take care.
Good one, Jay.
Bye.
See you soon, man.
You too.
Oh man, that was awesome. Always an enjoyable phone call with our buddy Jay. We do have another person in the queue. I just want to remind everyone that this is a call-in show. It's also a Q&A show, so it's the call-in show. If you don't want to be on the screen, you can ask your question in the comment section on our Discord in the Ask a Question section. Or if you're on Patreon, there is currently a chat message in the supporters chat asking if you would like us to answer a question or learn how to speak in some cases. We do have somebody in the queue, so I'm just going to move on and allow them in. We don't have a name for them here, but from their form, I think I know who it might be. So I'm looking forward to this.
Okay. Welcome to the
I
calling
enjoy the
show.
fact that there's no right way to speak also.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
We can. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Nice to meet you. Here, let me get rid of your video so you can't hear yourself. I just recently found you guys. I don't know if you guys have a specific goal for this episode, or should I just ask questions?
Oh, you can go wherever you like with it. Absolutely.
Any direction.
Well, one, I found you guys very recently. I do notice you guys have not gotten like crazy big traction yet. My question is, I also really like the stuff you talk about. I agree with most of it. Where are you gonna go with it when you guys blow up, when it's like big?
It's a great question.
Something we're gonna find out
I was gonna say,
when
don't
we
know.
get there. Yeah, that's very much like
Oh, okay.
there. We got ideas though.
We
got-
do. We have a business
Work.
plan and everything. But it's very much, it's in the same way that we live our lives, right? Like you can have some general idea of a direction in the future, but it could also be informed by other information. And for us, a big part of this is the community, is the people who get involved, people like yourself who call in, and even people who are working with us now who were part of the community. They all have ideas of their own. They all have creativity and insights, and they have access to things within their own consciousness that we don't, because we have different worlds, different lives. And so we don't know where this is going to go, but we know that there are steps and opportunities that emerge all the time. And sometimes we have the skills and the resources to take advantage of them, and sometimes we don't. And that's just going to continue to expand over time as more people become involved. So it's very much it's like we're growing a tree and building a tree house in the tree while it grows.
I like that terminology. That's very good terminology. I one day hope to do some stuff like what you guys are doing on the internet, talking to people, you know, streaming, stuff like that. I really like the idea of you're living today, you're living in the moment. I like peeked at one of your episodes before I signed up for this, obviously, but I did like what your name's Amanda, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
it is.
What Amanda was saying in one of the recent episodes where she was just going on about you're in today, you're dealing with today. You can hope for tomorrow, you can be happy about tomorrow, but you have to worry about what's going on today. I want to take that and, you know, use it in my life. I think I have been, because recently I did lose my job and been job hunting, got a part-time, about to get a full-time. It's hard to stay inside of that day when you have to worry about beyond, you know, but being in the day is able to, you know, produce more, I believe.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I would say that it's very much, I guess, allocating, because there's always a certain degree of looking forward to kind of establish a vague direction, but then how much are you not looking at the step you're on, which usually is the equivalent of how often you stumble or how often you kind of lose track of what you're doing because you're so busy looking over to what might be beyond the hill that you start tripping on the stones right in front of you. So you're right, it's very much a balance. And I think that, and I say this to somebody who's like mid 40s now, that balance really only comes through losing your balance over and over and over again. It really is, because it's in losing your balance that you go, oh, that doesn't feel quite right. And so you find your way back to alignment, which is always relaxing, always authenticity, always having, you know, just the willingness to go forward without needing the carrot or the stick. You know, that's usually where you find yourself in the quote unquote zone, because you're just being yourself. That's really all it is. You're just being yourself. And so it's a practice, you know, and I'm glad to say that it sounds like you're doing wonderfully. It's just, I would encourage you to remember, because occasionally it feels like, you know, I'm not being present, that's impossible, that you can get really caught up in the idea that you're not present, but you really have no choice. You're always present.
Yeah. And
Yeah, like doing this, like going, oh, what were you saying?
no, I just wanted to say that you're doing it right now, like making the most of.
That's exactly what I was about to say too.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's always our.
I feel like this is one of those steps where it's like, I do have goals, I want to do something, but, you know, going out of your boundaries and trying to reason through something and think about it with other people that are making videos and stuff, that stuff it's so entertaining, and I really hope people can like go out of their way to find it. I think a lot of like what I want to talk about is the dude that you guys were just recently talking to in your live stream, the preacher or whatever his name was. I feel like it's very hard to have those conversations with people that were raised completely like enveloped in that system, where if they dance outside of it, it's forsaking everything that they've gone through, all the people they've met, what they've talked about in their lives. They can't think about venturing outside of that boundary because it's almost impossible to forsake everything that you've done. That, like, staying present, of course, that man was trying as hard as he could to stay present, to stay, I need to validate my life, you know? And I feel like there's a point where I want to try to talk with people like you guys do, but that's the question. Where do you guys like draw the bounds? How do you venture into a conversation with someone about this?
I think a lot of it takes sensitivity. You know, it's going to be different for every conversation, and a lot of times this isn't even where it starts necessarily. It's like just talking to talk, you know, to interact with someone, to have a conversation just about anything. And then sometimes things have a way of playing out where like one thing leads to another, or like someone opens up, because it isn't as much about the words as it is, you know, the relaxation, you know, like how relaxed you are, how how sensitive, because when you're a little more relaxed, like there is more sensitivity, there's more attention, like they all kind of go hand in hand to that experience of like being involved in your situation. So, you know, for example, with someone like the pastor or anyone who's trying to have, you know, control, you know, really control their life, there's sort of a trade. Like if you're not prioritizing the experience that you're having primarily with your attention, it's like there's going to be a desire to like control more and more outside of that to make up for that lack of, you know, fullness of your experience. But it it differs for everyone, but I think a lot of in my experience has been just the more relaxed I am, the more it has a way of, I don't know, naturally playing out, because there doesn't have to be anything that's necessarily expressed specifically to anyone. Like I can't convince someone, said someone deeply entrenched in religious stuff, like just them seeing that there's other options is sometimes it, but it has to come from the person too.
Yeah. And
It's yeah, I get that. It's not about like the actual having the conversation. It's being so sure that you're able to have the conversation without losing it. You know, I get that.
yeah, trying not to, or I guess letting go of needing to prove a point is really helpful, or has been really helpful for me. And just sharing something that I'm interested in. And then it adds, or it takes away some of the pressure, you know, because if I need to have this conversation, or I really want to, and I'm really hopeful for it too, like that also is a different type of pressure. You know, it's just framed in a positive light. I'm hopeful for this conversation. I'm hopeful for this topic, because to some degree I'm trying to, you know, get somewhere. And so I would say check in to see if you're trying to make that conversation topic come up, versus just being so interested in it that it just naturally comes up because someone is like, what are you interested in? What are you so interested in? And they're going to be asking you to tell them about it, versus you looking for opportunities to tell them.
I find myself agreeing. I really like the switching the emotions you're feeling from positive to negative. I feel like I've done that in my life. I've tried to change being nervous and anxiety and stuff like that into just excitement. Those nerves are excitement, and you want something so bad. That's why you're getting nervous. That's why you're getting excited. I don't know. I don't want to take up the whole conversation with a bunch of serious stuff, though. I did want to switch before my time gets cut off. What you guys think about aliens? Because beyond all of this, I believe my one out of this world dream would to be living on Mars, or going into space and living in space and contributing to humans growing like that. What do you guys truly believe about aliens and like that whole goal for a lot of space stuff now?
For me, I would say it's not so much a matter of belief so much as just not holding on to some idea of myself that makes it impossible for other species to be out there. It seems kind of obvious that there's got to be, like, for the size of everything, there has to be, like, it just seems ridiculous that to think that there isn't. As
The statistics, the math on it, yeah.
Yeah, as for space, I think it's another frontier. I think it's another way that we can explore, but I think that it's going to really depend on us exploring ourselves. I think that the resources and everything else that we need to really do that requires us to move beyond money and rich people and corporations, so that way we actually do it in a unified way where the species itself is exploring and not just running from the planet that it's destroying.
Not to interrupt, to segue, I really agree with that too. I truly believe, like, I don't know, most of the lives that we are forced to live, the minimum wage, fighting for corporate or moving up in the ladder, it's not progressive. It's not going to push us towards that sort of goal. I do totally agree that eventually people have to start just working to be the best you can be, to be independent and lack all of the things that we are forced to strive for, to just really go for the moon, quote unquote. But Also, I wanted to ask Amanda and I'm forgetting your name. I'm so sorry. The other guy, what you guys also think about space and aliens?
Oh, with the alien conversation, yeah. Yeah, it's a fun thing to wonder about. Honestly, like before we started having conversations, I never really thought. I always figured like, yeah, it's like there's gotta be something out there. And even just like in eternity, like the variation of alien that's the three of us sitting here talking with you on the phone, but you know, I have a black shirt on and Ray has a red shirt and Amanda's jean jacket is a leather jacket. Like that could exist out there somewhere too, and like wonder about that and just the variations in an infinite reality. But
Oh, oh yeah, I am so on board. Like so I have thought for a while that there's gotta be aliens because of the size, like the numbers have it. I was like, there's no way that it's just us. And if it would be, that'd be lame. Like what do you mean it's just us on this planet? There's nothing else anywhere ever. Like that's just I was like, I don't like that story. I was like, I'd rather make it so that way there could be, but I always thought that like we were like kindergarteners in the landscape of space travel, and it's like we could barely get out the driveway. We only made it to the moon. So I feel like they're waiting for us to like how to drive off the driveway and onto the street before they're like, hey, confirmation, we are here. So I always thought that we were just
I love thinking about it like that. I think that right there is the only way you can really think about it is, of course there's aliens, and if there is, they're probably just waiting for us. But I feel like that can be one of the scariest thoughts that someone can have, is that maybe there are creatures that are as strong and as smart and as powerful as you think your gods are on Earth, but they might just be waiting. They might just be floating around, seeing if you're really able to become one of the spacefaring civilizations. That's a totally sci-fi thought. It's outside a lot of realm of people nowadays. They can't even think about something like that, but it's so, I don't know, it can be a really interesting way to think about life, is that, yeah, I'm a person going about my daily life. I need to focus on myself and do all this, but maybe there are giant aliens out there that are just waiting for us to figure it out.
But we don't know for sure. So it's like, I'm just going to go about my day. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not. And I don't need to worry about something that I don't need to confirm.
Yeah, you need to ignore that, because, that goal of becoming the best you can be and focusing on yourself and day by day working on what makes things better, it gets crushed by something like a huge alien in the sky. But I love thinking about stuff like that. I think it can be a future for us.
Absolutely. No, I have lots of questions for sure.
Yeah.
It's been a blast chatting with you. We really want to say thank you
Of
for
course.
calling in. We are unfortunately at the end of our time, but we're going to keep chatting about aliens.
No problem.
If nobody else
That's
calls
right.
in.
Thank you so much for calling in.
Of course, I'm going to keep my eye open, and I'm going to make sure I catch more of you guys, and hopefully I can offer more entertaining topics besides aliens. I do really appreciate this time.
Likewise. Yeah, we do this every 2 weeks, so we'll see you next time.
Have a good one, guys.
Have a good one.
Take care.
Bye.
Yeah.
Oh, God, I love call-in shows. Yeah, I have all kinds of questions, like perhaps, what we're experiencing right now is in fact just a certain perception of reality that we have the opportunity to move beyond, and in doing so, become what other versions of us consider to be aliens. Like, what if we're just seeing future adaptations of ourselves that are outside of space and time? You know what I'm saying?
Possibility.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's like we're seeing the wonderment, the ideas like of even the aliens that we've seen in cartoons. Like, are they just human evolution? Like, is that just human evolution that we're like is out in the ether?
Look at our own development, right? Like, we were talking about the fact that humans, earlier versions of humans, not Homo sapiens, but Homo habilis and whatnot, had larger bodies, right? But smaller brains. And as we've learned to allocate more energy to the brain, which was developing, our body took the hit. We ended up becoming smaller. in terms of just not needing all that sheer strength as well, because we were creating things, we were using tools, we were using our big, beautiful new brain, right?
Right.
So you take a look at that, like to the point again where human females now deliver babies 6 months before they should have been born, back when we were a different version of humanity,
Yeah.
right? The birth canal is smaller because of the smaller body. So humans are the only beings that are born without the ability to walk in a very short period of time because we're so underdeveloped coming into the world. Crazy. But the big change there is that our fucking head got bigger. Our head got bigger and our bodies got smaller. And when you listen to people's accounts of aliens, giant heads, small bodies.
It is.
A
So
future adaptation, maybe a possible
Right.
adaptation on any planet in any form, given enough time.
It's just going
Right.
in that direction.
What if they're dolphins that spawned legs in the future?
hmm.
Because dolphins have the same size brain as we do.
Ah,
I thought this
oh,
was a little
shit, they
bigger.
do. They're able to use a little bit more.
It could be
It
a
could
little
be,
bit
yeah.
bigger. The point
Right.
is that it's relatively the same, and
It is.
it's very much as advanced. And so, I mean, what's to say that later on they don't develop the ability to time
Right.
travel? They don't develop, new limbs and whatnot down the road, and all of a
There
sudden
is a
they're
thing-
coming back flying around in a
They
flying
could've been it,
saucer
right?
that's just manifested from them understanding that their reality, which is why it has no propulsion system whatsoever. It just banks, turns on a 90-degree angle, like there is no such thing as physics,
Yeah.
right? And it's all because they've transcended the three-dimensional illusion of physicality. And now they're just fucking around like it's their own dream.
That's right.
And I wonder if there's like a way, as a human, like let go, relax, whatever, enough consistently that's like, shifts start happening, like just from
I want to say quickly,
Yeah.
and I'm announcing this because I'm about to jack up the volume. So anybody who's been listening, and Jay, I appreciate you letting us know in the comments section, the volume is very low as of right now, and I can edit this after the fact, but I'm about to turn up the volume. So if you have your volume turned up real high, this is where you're going to want to turn it down. I'll give you a second or two.
okay, and we're back. How's the volume now? Should be higher. All right, cool. Good. Yeah, so
Aliens,
Glad,
dolphins.
right,
big
yeah,
brains.
evolution. Oh yeah,
Growing.
yeah. I was wondering if every human species, like there it is. Oh yeah, there isn't a I wonder if like there's variation of humans from different animals too. Like right now we're experiencing, because we came from the sea, like if animals are like different routes. And I guess they pretty much are from single cell
Yeah.
organisms. Like every
One tree of
variation of life is a variation of that single cell organism. And so if, with brains and whatnot, because anywhere that any species settles, they would call Earth. Yeah.
I love that point.
Yeah, I remember that one. That one's
No
pretty
matter
fascinating.
what species you are, your planet is called the dirt.
Yep.
The dirt.
Ground,
yes.
which
Ground.
would be necessary to some degree with life and the spawning of life. And so it all kind of like there are variations of Earth out there. There's living beings, and like if the not like the end variation, but like a very heavily involved evolution is like humanity. And it's like, what's next? And like the brain and the thinking to get to that variation, it's like on other planets, there may be very similar, evolution's just that to have that happen in the same period of time, it's like inevitable, but with how close it is, it's like, would we have interaction with them at some point? Who knows? I don't know. It's fun to wonder about.
Possibly. And I love that we're talking about like the evolution of brains and of life, and but also like the different ways that they're structured, because like technically we all came from mushrooms, and mushrooms was like all animals and plants are descendant of mushrooms, or have evolved from mushrooms. And mushrooms have a digestive tract that's outside of that's on the outside, and animals and humans, and they tend to have a digestive tract that's on the inside.
Mhm.
And I just think, how funny is that? Like, they're both digesting, but it looks totally different. And yet that also, that digestive tract, the mycelium is also like their neural network. And so it's also like the way that their brain is structured, and their brain stretches for thousands of miles. It stretches as far as the land will go. And I think that's so cool that like their brain is massive. Technically, they've got the biggest brain on the planet, you know, and we don't think of them as like a superior species or a form of life, but there are more species, there are more mushrooms on this earth than anything else. And if there really was an apex predator, we're totally surrounded by the mushrooms, and we don't even understand how much they are integrated into our life, and how that might be the most expansive and impressive brain that we have available to us. And yet we kind of feel like we tap back into that maybe when we take, you know, it feels like we can tap into that sometimes when our attention is edgeless.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's almost like if the earth is a brain itself, it's like
that's a big brain.
we spawn from that, mushrooms spawn from that, spawn
Yeah.
from mycelium, like we're just kind of like
Just
neurons
intelligence.
popping out of that brain, and the mushrooms are similar to that. And it's like we're kind of just a variation on some degree, like on this sliding scale of like
Yeah.
perspective. And we've kind of made the world relative to us, you know, like it's relative to human size, but in terms of big and small, we take those so seriously
Yeah.
and like give them so much truth, but
It's relative.
it's all entirely relative.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, it's
Right.
kind of funny, right? Because in the same way that we were kind of saying, like, when you look at like our brainstem and our neurons and all of that, it looks very much like a tree,
Mhm.
right? In how it's all connected. And when you look at a tree, you're like, oh wow, yeah, that makes sense. But a tree can't get up and move around. So we actually evolved an organic pot for our tree. We've developed an entirely different kind of
mobile
tree.
pots.
Really, that's exactly what we've done. I find it just fascinating that that's the case. That, you know, no matter where you go, you're seeing life expressed itself in ever increasing complexity,
Yeah.
right? But it's only a difference in complexity in terms of its ability to move around and communicate autonomously from the whole, right? Because I mean, mushrooms are always connected to the mycelium. The mycelium is a huge network that is aware of itself,
Yeah.
but it can't just get up and move around because it's connected to everything else. So in order for that intelligence to experience what it's like to move around, it actually has to have a greater perspective of division. So now all of the shit that it needs, like the digestive system, the
Yeah.
ability to gather resources, all that,
Changes.
it's all
like,
gotta go into a
prototype
packaging.
coming out.
right? Now we've got a packaging that we gotta wrap that shit into because it's gotta be protected as we're moving around.
Yeah, they
right?
were
So-
like, some of them are gonna have a tail, some will have fur, some will have scales. Get those models out. Go out there and live your life. Step for us, please.
Oh my gosh. And then we turn that into something that we measure and judge and like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
No,
Life is pretty
but-
cool.
Yeah.
You know,
it's
like the
get out
friction.
there and let me right. It's just like fucking variations of that. Like we don't have to have perspectives. Those like how could you have perspectives of that that's so unique? That's so obviously unique to you. But yeah, we really just packaged all that up, and then it's like we became very, very highly functional, but started taking the packaging really seriously.
Yeah, straight
And how
up.
the packaging functions and what it means. And then it's like,
Must be
well,
completely
we're just
separate.
judging different packaging.
We forgot the packaging doesn't make us separate.
Uh,
It gives us the experience of separation because now there's almost like a barrier between me and that.
mhm.
Right. But the fact is, there isn't really no barrier. It's just that you're used to feeling to the extent of that barrier. And now you're like, no, that's me. What I can feel through this biological packaging is absolutely me. It's like, yeah, but maybe you're still feeling everything else, but in a way that you can't translate because you keep thinking about the biological packaging.
Yeah.
And I want to mention we have an episode on this about emotions. It's a community topics episode about emotions and the fact that there is very much, I think, a connection between all of us when it comes to the environment that emotions exist within. And I think that that is something that we often disregard, that there are two different experiences happening in the world. There's the world of your physicality, and then there's the world of your subjective, emotional, psychological experience. And that happens in almost its own environment. And it's amazing in that way if you look at it that way, right? Because now all of a sudden you're like, oh wow, okay, so I'm dealing with things in this subjective experience as well as like it's not just that I'm going to the store, I'm going to the store through my doubts and expectations. Right. And that makes life so much more interesting.
Oh yeah, it's like everything that you do has the potential to have like it's an additional experience to whatever you're doing. And it's like, how seriously are you taking that additional experience is usually like how much you think it could potentially mean about you.
Yeah.
It's like the things we worry about are the things we think mean a lot about us. We were taught like deep down, like initial sort of experiences, like those are things that mean a lot about you, and how much that becomes like the priority, what it means about me, instead of, oh, I gotta go on this adventure to the grocery store right now. And that's a whole full experience right there, and instead of it being something that you could even like become afraid of certain experiences because you feel like you're so sure that like you can't handle the situation, so you won't even try, you won't even get on it. But yeah, it's that dual sort of experience. Yeah, I guess, with duality, with the perception of division, it's like it comes with the potential for two experiences, like what's actually happening and what you think is happening. Like those are kind of the two all the time. And how much are you it's basically like, are you prioritizing what's happening, or are you prioritizing what you think
No.
is happening?
We have a question, and as this is a call-in show or call-in show, I thought I would pass it over to Amanda for this one. How would you guys define yourselves? I'm guessing you're all very spiritual, but is it from less of a religious perspective and more from a everything is connected and means something way? Amanda.
How much time do I have?
As much as you want.
I know. It's just filler, but that's what I am. I'm not rushing to answer that as much as I used to. Defining myself isn't the priority. So I know that I don't define myself as spiritual, and I don't define myself as religious, and I am not rushing to fill in that blank. I'm here and making the most of being here without needing that definition, and having a lot of fun trying on different roles, different experiences, so sometimes it feels like I'm focusing on a very spiritual topic or a very religious topic, but I could view everything from another perspective. So it doesn't have to be that I'm viewing spiritual topics from a spiritual lens, because I can view them from a purely historical lens. I can view them from a purely economical business lens, so I actually could look at any topic from any direction. I could define myself in any single way, and I don't need to settle on one thing. And as the moments unfold and changes, it feels like we're just trying on different lenses to explore different layers of experience. And so, if I would put a word to it, it would be just an explorer, like to put one word on it, I would just choose, an explorer that doesn't need to get anywhere.
Yeah, changing a lot, like in terms of defining myself. I think a lot of it's been noticing ways that I have defined myself, or like certain terms or words used that then may pop up in certain situations that aren't as relevant anymore. Like, oh, I'm this type of person, or I'm that type of person. And just realizing how much settling on any specific definition or way of defining myself very much limits my experience, very much gets in the way of me being able to relax, because there's always like, well, I got to make sure I'm maintaining being this type of person. Like as soon as I define myself, there's like a craving, a satisfaction there. Like I've now defined myself. Now I know that, like I get that hit of certainty, but then the trade is that I got to maintain that. And it's like, okay, I am this, and like body tenses up a tiny bit. It's like we just have to maintain this tension or maintain this person and this perspective and this way of acting and this way of talking and this way of existing. And then, next moment could require, if my attention's there, could require a totally different response than me being like the type of person that I thought I was. And if I don't see myself as being able to handle that, I'll avoid entire situations because of that definition, because of how I see myself. But I get that sense of, satisfaction from the sense of certainty that I know myself. And I think it's far less limiting and potentially, not uncomfortable, but just what it is to not define yourself, not try and hold on to a conceptual idea, in your head so much as you go, because then it's like you're letting yourself live, letting yourself be sensitive to the experience. So yeah, I mean, there's certain, roles you can play, like right now, like say podcasts or like live stream or whatever, we call this, but that if I thought that meant that I had to act in a certain way or talk in a certain way, then that would get in the way of me being me. I might try and talk a little bit differently. And what would that be based on? Based on other people I've seen who have podcasted, and they might not be holding on to an idea of being a podcaster. They might just be being themselves there. So I'm just trying to be like another person or a group of people that I've noticed do a similar thing. So even in defining myself one way or the other as a nice person, good person, bad person, piece of shit, best thing ever, podcaster, lawyer, all those things, like we can come up with an idea of what they mean, but there's still just my assumption about it. And it's kind of just like a lot of times putting roadblocks. Like there is no objective nice or good or lawyer or any of the things that we come to. So yeah, I mean, a lot of the last couple of years of my life have been looking at the ways that I've defined myself and seeing that, oh, that's limiting my experience. So.
Yeah, I think that's it. It's it's often referred to that life is a mystery, and I think that's only just because we continue to try and figure it out, that there's this sense of, I need to put it together. I need to have some grasp of what's happening. I need to understand. And I think I've just gotten tired of that mentality as a whole, because that's really all labels like spirituality and whatnot really are. Even non-duality, like that's all fun in terms of description and whatnot, but they're just concepts at the end of the day. There's still an attempt to try and understand this so that way you can feel better about the grand question of what is this, that uncertainty that's constant. And I'm tired of that. I think what I'm left with is the experience of who I am, the experience that I'm having right now, the feeling of my hand, the feeling of my voice leaving my throat, the feeling of the air around me, just the experience I'm having in terms of expression. That is something that if I had spent as much time in my life really paying attention to that as I had trying to pay to why that was happening, where it was going, what did it mean, who was in charge, I think I would have a very different appreciation for my life that I'm just now starting to really come to in my mid-40s, that we get so lost in trying to answer a question that only exists because we're not fucking paying attention. And in paying attention, we find that a lot of the questions that we're asking come from a sense of need that does not exist when we are paying attention.
It kind of like answers itself when you're paying attention. It's like you realize how much is going on, like how many things are going on, and it's not about the thoughts and assumptions so much. It's like, because without the wondering, it's like you're left with what's actually happening. It's like it's a experience where you're not thinking so much, and like that isn't something that you can think your way too, you know, and you can't think your way out of thought. You can't get to a point where you've come up with an answer that solves, you know, the desire to keep looking for one, or solves the action that has to be taken to look for it, you know, to find the meaning of life, to wonder about it. It's like you keep diving into thinking, trying to answer that, and assuming that there's going to be a point where, because you have the answer, it's going to mean something about you, or you're going to have the ultimate sense of like direction. You're going to be able to answer that feeling of like, well, I don't know what's next. It's like, why do we keep looking? Like, what would we get? What do we think we would get if we got, you know, an answer to a big question? It's like a gold star and
And
like
then what?
feel really good about yourself. Is that it? Or then is it ultimate control? Is it a guarantee? Is it certainty? Like, is that what you want? Do you want your whole experience to be guaranteed? You're going to feel great for the rest of your life, no matter what, as long as you know, as long as you keep not jumping into new things. Like, is it going to solve that feeling of petrifying fear when you're trying something new and, you know, you're afraid of getting judged and failing? Like, does it answer that feeling? Does it solve that feeling? Like, no, there's experience there. And so, you know, when I wonder about questions like that, it's like, it's fun to like think about stuff and like talk about it for sure. But like, yeah, it's any of the things that I'd be concerned about, I wouldn't even want them solved by something. And like, do I really think that I'm going to get something out of answering that question?
Possibly. I do like the question, you know, what does life mean? And to some degree, you experience whatever you decide it means, is how I'd like to phrase it. You know, and I can't say life means what you say it means, but I would be so bold to say that you experience the meaning that you decide is there or not. So if you think that life is worthwhile, then you will experience that meaning that you have given it. You know, if you say that it's not worth anything, then you're not going to experience, or that's what you are going to experience. You're going to experience the lack of meaning because you have decided that it has no meaning, and therefore you will experience a lack of. But that's not necessarily to say that it is meaningful or it isn't. Like the nihilist, life means nothing. There's no point, or we're super hopeful. Life means everything. It's magic. It's bliss. And it's like, no, but you can certainly experience a lot of what you envision, a lot of what you imagine. And we can imagine dreams as much as nightmares, but that's not what's happening. We can certainly contribute to the experience that we both create and then feel engulfed by, or feel at peace, or or without conflict of. I think that's probably reasonable. You can still have your assumptions, but you don't have to be in conflict with every assumption that you think of.
Nice. Well said. I want to remind everybody that this is a call-in show and we still have a little bit of time left. If you would like to join us, please do so at dualisticulnity.com/live. Just fill in the form, let us know what you'd like to chat about, and agree that you don't mind it being part of an episode, and we can chat for up to like 10 minutes. We have a follow-up question. How do I let go of this need to have my questions answered then? How do I let go and just be okay with existing? And I think it really helps, or at least it helped me to recognize there is no how. There is no how to let go. Like the search for the how to let go is the holding on.
Mm-hmm.
The letting go is actually as simple as just being where you are. No, the question of like, how do I stop asking questions? It really comes down to understanding where the questions are coming from.
Mm-hmm.
I think like a lot of your questions are coming from a sense of lack, a sense of need, a sense of you got to get somewhere or get away from something, right? A lot of the questions come from a sense of fear. And so recognizing that asking the question often reinforces the place that it's coming from can help. There's nothing wrong with asking questions. Ask questions all the time. That's how you learn. But it's what questions are you asking, and are they coming from a place that ultimately you're trying to escape through asking those questions? It becomes a loop that you just end up chasing your own tail.
Right, like asking, how do I stop this implies there is something to stop.
Exactly.
You know, like the answer, not even the answer, but the assumption is built into the question more often than not.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's like answering it doesn't solve where it comes from. It's like bringing it along with you. It's like running from a wagon that you're dragging behind you.
Yeah.
It's like, how do I
Where's that noise coming
let
from?
go of this thing to get over this thing? Or and it's like you're the one dragging. It's like you got a grip on it. It's like, well, yeah, I've always had this grip on it. What do you mean? That can be released? Like that's an option. It's like wondering how to get rid of it while still holding on to it. It's like, oh, well, you gotta let go in order to, not keep running from it. But it's like that's not something someone else can do. Like that decision, that willingness to forgive yourself for whatever things that you think you're afraid of happening or wished hadn't happened.
Well, that's it. And I think the danger there is the idea of forgiveness. Like you should be okay with it. It's not even about forgiveness so much as the understanding that you don't have all the knowledge you need to judge it. You don't have the clarity to be able to judge it for what it is, and there's a question in the chat here that I wanted to cover because this kind of goes in the same line. How do I stop wanting to kill myself? And I want to say, first off, if you're not a listener of the podcast, then you don't know everything I've communicated in the first 2 seasons of this. I lived there for 10 years and I even tried. I circled the drain for a long time, and I would like to share with you, I think the pivotal thing that changed everything for me. And it's not gonna change things overnight, but I need you to take this in. The you that you want to kill isn't the you that you are. You are looking at an idea of yourself, a perception of yourself, and you are making the assumption that it's the truth. You look at things that you've done and you see a mistake. You look at ways that you've acted or things that have happened to you and you see something that shouldn't have happened or something that's going to ruin the rest of your life. And what you're seeing there is an assumption. That's what you're seeing. And it's not you. But the more you identify with it, the more you want to think you know who you are, the more that shit will drag you down. And so this is why it's typically referred to as an ego death. It's the recognition that the idea of you isn't the truth. Now, that's not going to make your life blissful overnight, but it's going to take some of the pressure that you're putting on yourself off. Just ask yourself, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe what I think of myself is incorrect. Maybe I keep assuming things about what I've done without having the benefit of enough time behind me to put it into context. Every teenager feels like everything they do is a mistake, that everything is being judged. And when they grow up into the 30s, 40s, and 50s, they look back and they go, oh, well, that's ridiculous. I needed to go through those things. How do you know that what you're going through right now, you won't look back at later and see as valuable? How do you know that your demons won't eventually become angels? And the better question is, are you willing to do the work to make that happen? And the work is in letting go right now of the idea that you can know in any way that is conceptual or an idea who you are, any way that you can measure your value. You can't. Your value is immeasurable. It cannot be compared to others because all you're doing is looking at assumptions. How do you let go of wanting to kill yourself? Let go of the self that you think you are.
Those assumptions, they're very personal. The assumptions that we know, period, something. It's like, no, I know. And it's like, if we're thinking we know things, like knowing ourselves is guaranteed. It's like, of course I know myself. I've been around me the whole time. And yet
I'm an expert in me.
Yeah. I've got
a PhD.
It's been a very like it's been
ADHD.
Need HD. That's
Off
right.
my class, off my class. on
That's
that one.
right,
Big.
right, with a minor in obsession.
Not addiction, just obsession.
Identity University,
There's
accepting applications.
responsibility
Oh,
and
That's good,
obsession.
right?
Oh my
and
God.
and the person
Addiction.
followed up. They said, I'm addicted to proving people wrong.
Oh,
And
yeah.
that's fantastic
Resonate
that
with
you're
that.
recognizing that, because it makes sense that you would want to. We live in a world that we were raised in order to be right, where our value was immediately synonymous with being correct all the time. And so when you don't feel like you have value, you immediately want to look for opportunities to establish that value. Don't judge yourself for that, but recognizing it is a huge step. Right now, you should be patting yourself on the fucking back
Yeah.
just for looking at that, because that's honest. And then you start to recognize, like, oh, okay, well, maybe I don't need to be right all the time. Maybe I am just trying to feel a little better. And all of a sudden you become a little bit more willing to not pipe up right away and say how much you know. You're willing to let other people express themselves. And then all of a sudden your relationships start to change. But this is how. It's through that self-honesty, without judgment. To understand that everything you've done up until now, you did because you thought it was the only thing you could do. It was because it was everything you fucking learned. You haven't made any mistakes. You've been slugging it through a bunch of bullshit that was taught to you by people who are suffering. Well done. You're still here.
That's incredible, just to be able to give yourself space to choose something differently, right? And that's what it feels like when you don't need to be so certain. And I resonate so much with being addicted to proving people wrong, because I was so desperate to prove myself right. And that's why I was so adamant. I would fight tooth and nail. The minute that somebody would oppose me in a conversation, it was like, that's it, I'm dying on this hill. This is the hill of being right. I will die on this hill, damn it. I have defended this land for countless days and nights.
You're arguing over the pronunciation of a word.
Oh my goodness, I was that person. Oh my God, getting so upset. Like, oh my God, these idiots. Well, how do they walk across the street by themselves? Like I would be so desperate to just prove that I knew what was happening, that I was right, that I had control, that I wasn't lost, that I wasn't, in danger, at risk, just that I could get to a point where I wouldn't need to be afraid. And when I could see that I was more so trying to prove myself right than trying to prove people wrong. People being wrong was just a means to my right end. And then it was just seeing that it really had nothing to do with them and everything to do with how I saw myself or how little I saw, and how much I saw the assumption and the idea of me. And I was so certain, I was sure I knew what Amanda or I was, and it just, and I was certain that it wasn't enough and that I needed to do everything possible to finally become enough and for life to be worthwhile. And yet, as I was even, quote unquote, getting those victories and winning in conversations and crushing people in conversation, it didn't deliver. And I used to say that, like, it didn't work, like the system's not working. We need to just admit things are not working. I'd like to rephrase that. It's not that it's necessarily, I could say it's not working, but how I'd like to view it and describe it now is just that it didn't deliver on the promises it said it would.
Yeah.
And that's what the big wake-up call for me is, that no matter how many people I proved wrong, it never really gave me that feeling of being right. And so that was something that I am so grateful for, all the times that I was pulling teeth. And I'm so glad that I went so hard to prove people wrong, because it made it so obvious when I could see that it wasn't about them and it was about the idea and the assumption of me.
Yeah, the desire to prove people wrong, like we'll do that. And in some like karaoke, even we'll be so sure that
Make sure you work
we
the
sang
stage,
in a certain way.
Make sure.
Yeah, or someone will tell you how you could be better, or someone says you did a great job and you didn't think you did, and you discount their perspective entirely because you're so focused on being correct. It's like, and then because you feel like you have control of that perspective, it's like you feel like you almost want, there's like a weird desire to prove that correct, prove your perspective correct, even if it is a fucking crazy perspective that you wouldn't have any perspective of anyone else. It's like you desire to make it correct almost, and you still don't have that control. You could act exactly how you think you have to act in order to prove that, and it still guarantees nothing. It still guarantees nothing whatsoever. So even to prove your own perspective for yourself, you can't do it if you can't even do it for yourself. So it's like to maintain such a strong, desire to be correct about yourself, because that's what a lot of it becomes an expression of. It's like, I want to be right because then it proves that I'm at least right about myself, or that I'm someone who, is better. It's like becomes a means of measuring almost. Like how correct can I be throughout the day? How many right answers can I get? We turn life into a test. Like, how many perspectives can I have and then confirm in reality?
How valuable can I become?
Yeah. How valuable can I make myself today?
Oh my goodness.
We have more questions. We have one, and I want to get into this because my perspective of this has changed a lot, and I've had a lot of experience with this. So, is taking shrooms to have an ego death an experience you'd recommend being older before taking, for example, being an adult, 18 or over? I think the question comes from a misunderstanding of what's happening on mushrooms to some degree. And what I mean is that an ego death is not something that is achieved. It's not a one-time thing. In fact, what it is kind of a glimpse at reality that you will have in greater or lesser depth, depending on how much you are thinking about the idea of yourself and the trajectory through your assumption of time as a whole. So if you're thinking about yourself a lot, you're not really getting a glimpse at reality. You're really getting immersed in these thoughts about reality, this assumption about reality, this assumption about where you're going, what might be happening, how you're doing, all of that stuff. And when you have just a moment of going, well, maybe I'm not that, you have had a quote unquote ego death. Now your ego will never die because it is your ticket to ride. It's a beautiful experience once you start to get the hang of whatever the fuck it is. But the ego death we're talking about is just letting go of it as reality. It's the death of your commitment to the ego. That's what it is. It's not the death of the ego. It's the death of your commitment to the ego. And it happens in small stages throughout your entire life. It is actually part of the organic developmental process of our ego as a whole from childhood onward. If we were just given enough time and enough space and the right environment, these are all things that we would come to. We would question our idea of ourselves. We would eventually take the pressure off. We'd let go of all of these assumptions. This is something that is absolutely natural. It's just that our environment, our society, our economy, all of that does not make it a priority. And so we're severely hindered, even in our education, which is only about getting a job and has nothing to do with you developing as a fucking human being. So that said, when you take psychedelics, you are removing, or rather seriously decreasing, the default mode that you operate in, all those background thoughts. So you are putting yourself in a position of a moment of clarity that you would have with slightly less depth without the psychedelics. So instead of thinking it as, oh, the mushrooms are doing it for me, you're still doing it. The mushrooms are, in fact, just accelerating it. And the reason I want to put it that way is because those moments of peace that you have in your life without psychedelics come after moments of confusion, moments of frustration, moments of disappointment, moments of emotional turmoil. And so in the same way that you go from one moment of clarity to another moment of clarity through a sea of shit over possibly weeks or months, you will go through that same experience in minutes or hours on psychedelics. So you're not shortcutting anything. And I really want to make this clear. That a lot of people look into mushrooms, they're like, oh yeah, I'm going to do that. I'm going to have an ego death. And then they end up face to face with their attachments, the shit they don't want to let go of, the fears that actually drive them towards those attachments that they have never looked at. And it becomes very jarring. And so I would say, if you're going to use psychedelics, use it with the understanding that it's an accelerator pad for change, not pleasant change, which is how you grow. You don't need them, is what I'm saying. You can just pay attention.
Yeah, like certainly not an accelerator pad, but it can almost like be a component of the change in yourself, like even just a willingness to try mushrooms, take mushrooms, like it's, jumping into an uncertain experience, and there's going to be maybe things you go through, things you see, but it's like a component of you changing, like it's another thing, kind of like talking about, being one, being God, like that whole conversation isn't like the point to just like sit there and talk about it all the time. It's like a conversation that could be had among, a billion other conversations that could be had. Like mushrooms are another experience, just like, taking a walk and have that potential. And yeah, there's like maybe more internal impact or shift or whatever, but it's still like a component of you changing, being like the overarching your experience. And so it like fits into that, but yeah, it gets kind of flip turned into doing something for you a lot of the time. And it can definitely be a component of shifts and whatnot, but then it's like, yeah, you see certain things and then it's facing them and dealing with them and going through them. And like, it can feel initially the shifts can be like, big grand things like, oh, I never thought about this, or like, oh, wow, reality just is, like life just is. There isn't, a blueprint, or reality isn't this like constructed thing that we look at right now. It's like, it's just sort of a baseline thing, but then, they can start showing you more personal stuff. And then it's like, you go through those things and work through those, and they're almost like, yeah, I mean, like I said, they're showing you a glimpse of that experience, but then also reasons that, you don't experience that all the time. You get looks at all those things, and then, the actions happen outside of that though.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's very cool. Like just how mushrooms amplify the changes that you're in the midst of. And they amplify, what your focus is, what your priorities are. And it's so jarring because we have a lot of assumptions about how great or how terribly we're doing. And then we get to see that it's like, maybe it's not as bad as I think. And then sometimes it leads to, maybe it's just not what I think. And there's more than just my thoughts. And I feel like the mushrooms can sometimes take your perspective and you zoom out, and then it just changes like a kaleidoscope, and all of a sudden you're looking at an entirely different view, entirely different perspective. But then it's not like it eliminates, it doesn't shave off potential, it doesn't shave off steps. It just changes the perspective of the step that you're on. And sometimes there's a little bit of resistance or conflict with that change, or with that assumption being burst to some degree. I feel like mushrooms do a lot of they give a lot of space for bubble bursting, because usually we're blowing it up with assumption, and then it's just harder to maintain the script. It's harder to maintain the assumption on mushrooms, and that's just it not doing necessary. It's just sometimes it feels like people think that, or I thought that mushrooms do the work, and they don't do any work. They just highlight what's being done at the moment. They amplify the step that you're on. And sometimes we don't want to take a clear look at that step because the assumption feels more pleasant.
Well, or you start doing the thing where you're using mushrooms to feel better, like you're using mushrooms to get in touch with reality, to really have an attentive moment. And the problem there is that while that's true, they're offering you lessons at that exact time into why you need them to do that. And that's very much the point. You don't. You really don't. All mushrooms are teaching you is how to relax. But often we want them to do the work because we don't want to relax the rest of the time. We want to feel like we're in control. There are certain things we're still invested in, and the mushrooms won't do the work for that. That's why you have people who have done fuck tons of mushrooms and are still egotistical, are still, looking at them as something that makes life better rather than them just making life better, because mushrooms don't do shit.
No.
No, and yeah, it's like you don't, because you really don't need them. Like if you're just aware and like not making so many assumptions and going through stuff, because then it's like you take mushrooms to, especially if it's like hoping to feel better, or you're going in, you kind of are maybe aware of some of the things that you were aware of the last time, or it'll give you a good look at more of yourself, and like it won't feel good at all. Like it just shows you more and more perspectives of yourself, like potential perspectives too, like not guarantees, but just things that maybe, oh, that was in a side of this room that I hadn't noticed or hadn't realized or hadn't paid attention to right here. And it'll shift that focus, but it still has to do with you very much so, and like your experience and the apple, and then applying it. Like it's not like to assume that you take them and in this 4 to 6 hour period, like
It's
your
not a
life
silver
totally
bullet.
changes. Yeah, without actually doing the things. It's like there's things in your life that are impacting things. There's your priority, like moment to moment, is creating your life, your focus, your attention. Where you give that attention is
Right.
shifting and changing and curating your life in a lot of ways. And so to assume that mushrooms can just be something that's taken and then without what you don't then shift your attention and your focus and where your priorities are. It's like
Right.
maybe there's an opportunity to see a reason to shift those priorities, but you're still shifting your priorities. And that has nothing to do with mushrooms.
Yeah, that's entirely up to you. It's like metaphorically or in my imagination right now, we're a gymnast. And I mean reality. Reality is just a gymnast. And there's a lot of self-taught practice, a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of interest. And then all of a sudden we meet this coach, this out of this world coach named Coach Shroom. And then, Coach Shroom amplifies the attention that we're bringing every day to practice. And bringing and matching our enthusiasm and matching our attention. And then all of a sudden we create a new trick that's so dope. And then we think I can't ever come up with a trick without Coach Shroom's help. It's like, no, they just amplified the enthusiasm, the attention, the focus that you were bringing every day. They just amplified that. They just boosted that, what was already happening. And so, yes, it is fun. The option is there, and they are a dance partner, but you don't need the dance partner to dance alone. And that's the way that I think is a consideration for how to view shrooms, is that it's a dance partner, but you don't need the dance partner when you're dancing by yourself. And you always are dancing by yourself, and the music is your life.
That's awesome. We have kind of some fun comments here. We made fridges and chairs, but we didn't make pine trees and rocks, man. This guy's remembering his freshman year. Apparently, I just want to say that's kind of a funny insight, because who do you mean by we? Like,
Yeah.
what are you identifying with there? The body that you're in, the species you're a part of, or reality itself? Like what is the division between you and those things? It's not to say that we made them, in the same way that, we weren't made. We came to be, and then we express things accordingly. We express things, we've expressed our ideas, and they've become fridges and chairs, but we were expressions of something else. We were expressions of potential in itself. And so I don't think there is any separation. I think that we are the trees. We are the fridges, we are the chairs, we are the rocks, we're all of it. It's just that we tend to have the idea that we're not, and that gives us the blissful experience of not being.
Yeah, we are those things as well. And yeah, it's like, because that experience of like just thinking and focusing on thoughts, like it for a long time felt like just kind of what reality is, thinking about stuff or if I'm in a certain situation, I want to think like looking forward to things, and how much that became. And then of course, like my idea of my value was always like right there with it and what it meant about me. And then it was like, avoid certain situations, don't jump into certain situations, do jump into certain situations. But like, it's all in my head. And so much of that feeling, that sense, that guarantee of being separate from something, like I got to start thinking about stuff. And it's like, if I'm not thinking about stuff and I'm just here, I'm just involved, I'm just interacting, you know, paying attention, it's like the wondering about things can be fun to do, but it's like you gotta almost sink back into wondering to think about a lot of these questions and like, oh, what about this versus this? And yeah, obviously looking around, you can feel like, oh yeah, well, I can go point and touch this printer right here, but this assumption that I moved through, even through like empty space, it's like there's still a lot of stuff there, and a lot of our sense of division, even physically, is like self-defined, you know. And we'll get like the phantom limb thing. If someone gets a limb cut off, they'll still feel like it's there. They'll still feel like it's them. And then if we start thinking about ourselves a lot, you get the full body clench, and it's like you want to become super aware of your body, of like, it's like a hyper awareness of, you know, like, no, I'm definitely divided from this. Is the full body clench, is that feeling of like, I am aware of myself. And yeah, it's like you have to think about that stuff as well.
We have a question here. You have been identified as Sundance Guy. Just
Yeah,
because
I'll take it.
for the listener
Okay.
who is not watching this live, Andrew is wearing a shirt that says Sundance on it. It's not just that he is dancing in the sunlight. There is no actual reason for it aside from that. What does Sundance Guy make? He looks like a creator. There you go. What do you make? And try not to be graphic.
Yeah. Oh man, I've made a number of things, videos that I find interesting. Part of me is like, I don't even know where to start or answer that, because there's a side of me that feels like there is almost like it felt like a different sort of person making those things, or I felt like I was different doing those things and making all that stuff for a while. But yeah, I got into making social media videos like almost 4 years ago now, and started out with just expressing, sharing myself, and then kind of just started taking it seriously and started making, you know, a lot of videos about specific things. But it was always just things that made me, well, I would always say things that made me feel better. Like it was a lot early on ways of thinking about things, you know, like self-help type dialogue, and then shifted more so to talking about, you know, being, experience, you know, reality. But it was a lot of talking about things. It was from reading books, it was from learning things, because that's a lot of what's shared. It's like how we, you know, being able to utilize social media to share, you know, someone's quote was like early on stuff that I expressed, and
I love that quote.
Yeah.
That's validated intelligence, don't you know?
Yeah.
That is certified,
Yeah.
you know.
Sure. Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. It was just approved. And so it's like, of course, I'm going to take someone else's words that I know have been verified, that are socially acceptable, that I know are externally validated and valuable. And so I'm going to take those words, because experience in and of itself couldn't be worthwhile and valuable.
Yeah.
No, it's got to be filtered and then, you know, judged and graded on a scale. And then after excruciating testing, it's either reliable and valuable, or it's not. And I resonate so much with that of just, I'd rather use someone else's words, because there couldn't be any meaning in mine.
Couldn't be any value to mine. And yeah, and that's where it kind of started, and over time shifted into, you know, more podcast discussions, and then kind of moved back to videos I enjoyed making. And now, you know, we have a lot of just like, we have a lot of content out there. And so a lot of it's like pushing this content, pushing this conversation, but a lot of our conversations here, they're not even, specific to a certain topic or anything. So it's like, what am I making? I don't know. I'm expressing myself now and making things that I find interesting. And I appreciate you bringing that up because it kind of reframes how I've been thinking about just my content. And it's like, I can just make stuff that I want to make and like do that and be creative with it. Like my creative juices have not felt like they've been flowing a whole lot recently, but it's like, you got to start somewhere, got to start posting stuff.
And I have a question for you. Now that you just say creative juices are, weren't flowing, it's like, are creative blocks not a part of the creative process?
Exactly.
They are.
How do you
Indeed.
like yourself?
There's an accumulation period, right? I discount that first, 25-year accumulation period.
Makes it hard to beat yourself up.
Uh-huh.
Right. The
Yeah.
blocks is because you're wasting time, sir. How dare you?
Exactly. It's all part of the process. All part of it.
There is no wasted time.
There is never wasted.
Now, we are unfortunately down to the portion of the show where we no longer have any time to take any calls, but we do want to say thank you to everybody who could call in for this show. We do have a question, though, from the Discord in the Ask a Question section. I do encourage you to join our community Discord if you haven't as yet. Full of fucking dope people, dope events, and it's run by Jazz, our administrator. It's really just quite the experience. And you can join us every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern time for a game of putt party. Basically, it's digital mini putt. Anyway, this was asked last call-in show, and we didn't get a chance to go into it because it was asked at 4:42. Giving us a whole extra 7 minutes. Is everything not subjective, including your and my opinion? So I would say that that's a fascinating question and very much the basis of what most of our conversation has been. That in fact, all opinions are just perceptions. Like all perceptions are valid from the perceiver, but that means that none of them are actually what is. What is includes all perception, but is not perception.
And so, yeah, we'll want that to be true almost, and that's, I think, a part of even cognitive dissonance is like, no, my opinion, my perspective is the extent of like what I have to focus on, what I have to experience, my guiding light, my guiding direction. It's like, that's where our faith goes, is in that, wild ass, like wild card opinion that shifts all the time. And a lot of times doesn't even come from ourselves. It's like our opinion of things is something that's kind of trained into stuff. And so it's not even necessarily your perspective a lot of times, but yeah, it's absolutely subjective. And I always get the imagery of like, there being 8 billion people on Earth. And if everyone's following their opinion as like their guiding light, their truth, and like not seeing past their opinion, their preference, which, to a certain perspective, to myself in a lot of ways, is like feels like you're letting go of something. And yet when you put it into the context of things, it's like everyone's running around being guided by their unique opinion that is subjective to them and based on their opinion, their preference, oftentimes just what's best for them without taking in many considerations beyond that. It's like, of course we're going to have chaos. Of course we're going to have madness, everyone running around blind like crazy. And yet to an individual, the realization like, oh, my opinion, my perspective, my preference is irrelevant. Like it's irrelevant to life. It's irrelevant to reality. Almost feels like you're telling someone, it can feel like they're, like if you're saying your perspective, you're not your perspective, but like your preference and your opinion relative to life. I'm not saying relative to like another person. It's like there's a conversation there, but it's not relevant to reality. Like it doesn't help you. It doesn't help guide you. It doesn't help you get to a certain spot because it is entirely subjective. And a lot of time cuts down a lot of that, awareness and sensitivity. The more you follow and focus on that, there's a big trade there.
It's interesting to even think about the word subjective because it's like it's subjective because it's subject to your opinion. It's almost at the mercy of your opinion, the way that you're viewing or experiencing something.
And then objective is, you know, without an opinion. And it's like, picture a sunset. Don't think it's beautiful. Just picture the sunset. Literally just picture it, just take it in. Just, it is what it is. It's there. That's it. Stop there. That's very hard to do. For the most part, because our tendency has been to either label it as that sunset is beautiful, or I can be doing something better with my time.
Yeah.
You know, that sunset is not worth my time. Like it's so often that we don't take in things for very long before we make it subject to our opinion. And so, because that was that came to mind because that somebody had asked me to do that when they were like, I was like, oh, we're not that subjective. And they're like, okay, great. Look at that sunset right there.
Yeah.
Don't think anything about it. And I was just like, fuck, it's beautiful. You know? Like immediately. Like I couldn't just look at a tree and just see the tree and stop there. I couldn't just see the tree. It was seeing it and then immediately having an opinion and immediately attaching meaning to that opinion, and then an assumption and then the experience, and then it just becomes this self-feeding loop.
It could be something as simple as, oh, that's very bright, in contrast to what? You know, there's a big spectrum of brightness out there, right? So it's in contrast to the spectrum that you're familiar with. So even that's not necessarily the truth, and it can't be. This ties into another question that was just asked. What are your thoughts on, and I say this in quotes, experiencing awareness without form is unimaginable, but is the ultimate reality. And so that quote, I would say, is spoken by somebody who's really not enjoying their life, because that's really what that comes down to. The ultimate reality is reality. Like, unity is duality. That's the point. The unimaginable experience of not having form can only be experienced through form. That's very much the point. That unity can only be experienced through duality because they're the same thing. They're the same thing with the added bonus of perspective, the division between the observer and the observed. But there is no actual division between the observer and the observed, which means that every moment, every reality is the ultimate, whole, complete, eternal reality that will ever be.
Here and now.
That's it. That's the whole thing right there. And it sounds a lot like kind of the non-duality, sort of like, remove yourself. It's like the ultimate experience is a lack of experience or no experience. It's like, oh, there's a fullness to this. There's a fullness when you're paying attention and not making it about you. And it's like, whoa, there's a lot there. And like, even just the willingness to let yourself go, like not try and maintain so much of a sense of control. It's like, if it is all, interconnected in one thing, like the attempt even to control is just getting in your own way. Like it's just going to make you stumble. And so that's an experience right there. It's like not following that sense of, staying in control, making it about me, feeling good about myself, even prioritizing that. It's like there's a new experience, not prioritizing that for a bit. And there's so many variations to how full this experience is that we can like direct our attention in different ways. It's like it is fucking magical and fascinating and mind-blowing and unbelievable. It's like almost unfathomable the point at which this is, like even trying to comprehend this. It's like to think that there's some sort of like, oh, ascending to 5D and becoming this and alternate world galaxy battles and stuff. It's like another, fun story to think about and whatnot. But it's like there's a lot of fucking shit going on right here. Like the fact that we can simultaneously move things and talk and interact and experience emotions, experience fear and anxiety and anger and frustration, and how immediately sort of felt our experience is based on our responses to experiences. Like it's insane. It's fucking insane. So yeah, it's like this is a lot here, I'd say.
Yeah, there's so much. And there's no rush. So I know that we're pretty much wrapping up our call today, but it has been an amazing call and show. And I'm so glad that you all could join us. Thank you to everybody who was calling. And we will be back in 2 weeks for another call and show, but we also have our public group tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern time. So if you couldn't call in today, please join us tomorrow. And we'd love to keep all of this exploration of so much going without trying to get anywhere.
That was perfect. Thanks so much, everyone. We'll see you soon.